Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, and it's Friday again, so time for another time-lapse/tutorial video. And this time I won't be using gouache, I won't be using ink, I won't be using any other paint, but I am using Copic markers to color my piece. And for the sketching and the detailing, I am using my Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils. However, I'm also using Derwent's soft color pencils, and that's basically it for today. So you see me sketching in the background, and for this piece I wanted a warmer feel. The previous one was pretty cold with the blues and grays and sadness, and now I really wanted to draw another piece with more happiness into it. And I'm planning to print it on a canvas and hang it somewhere. So it was time for some happy feelings, and I thought oranges are really happy and really warm. And for a bit of promotion of my company, Centaur, because hey, what's in the name, eh? So I am already working on the fine-tuning of the piece. I use a darker orange pencil to make those lines really clear, and it makes coloring also a bit easier. Without it, it can become a giant mess. Can be really interesting though, but I like to play it a bit safer so the piece won't be all over the place. And she is holding a fence because I thought that would be very cool. And for the fence I used some references, because how do they hold those fans? And that's kinda important. And now what I like to do with Copic markers before using them is swatching them. I swatch the hell out of them. And the reason for that is different kinds of paper have different effects on your markers, and I like to try out color combinations before I use them on the final piece. With some other materials I'm not that afraid of it. Pencil is a bit forgiving, and with gouache paint you can paint over it, but with Copic markers that is really hard to do. So that's why I swatch the hell out of them. And I use lots of browns, so the brown combinations and the skin combinations I've used pretty often. However, I like to experiment with purples and other colors in for the clothing and things like that. And in this case, Copic markers are pretty bright, but I have a few pastel ones, and the pastel ones are really great for shading something. In the kimono, for example, I didn't want a very harsh brown shadow, because I wanted to create a bit of more contrast between the warm and the cold, so I chose a violet color. So here I am working my ass off of the skin. I like to start with the skin because you saturate the paper then. So if the paper would bleed, then you already saturated that part, so another darker color won't bleed that easily in your lighter part. So if you're working with Copics, start with the lightest parts and add those beautiful colors. I like to start with the shadows first, because I blend the heck out of them. And I just really like that look. Some people like to give it place a base coat first, then go over it with different kinds of shadows and then blend it out again. I'm really like, well, I'm adding the darkest color first, then go over it, so there's a really smooth gradation. And I am basically doing all the colors of the piece. I like to do the hair and I will be adding more details later in the piece with colored pencils because it isn't a very big piece. The paper format is A4, so that's like 21.7 centimeters by 29.7. I could be wrong a few millimeters. I'm sorry about that. But the markers have pretty wide nibs, and the brush nib isn't too wide, but still it isn't a very, very small pointy one. So that's the reason why I like to add some more details afterwards with colored pencils and to make it more pop, to make it more interesting. If I would work on a bigger piece, then I could be using the Copic markers to make more details with that, because I've got quite a bunch. I got a bunch years ago from my uncle. I was really happy with it, and it came around the perfect time. So that was perfect. I got myself a few markers then, and well, I think a few weeks later I got a present from him and he gave me a bunch of those markers, and I was so ecstatic because they are not the cheapest. I used other markers before, and I think it was called the Pro marker, and I used Stabilo markers, I think. However, the Stabilo ones were water-based markers, so you don't have that smooth feel on the paper. They usually have lines, and if you have Copic markers, they go over the paper and they can make it really solid color without stripes and things like that. So it's really interesting, and you can create so much depth with them, and there are so much colors of them. You don't need every marker. I would love to own every marker though, but it's not necessarily. You don't need them necessarily. I would suggest some lighter tones and, well, colors you really like and use a lot. So here you can see me detailing the piece with colored pencils. Also, I like to try out if the pencil shows up on the paper, because this paper is fairly new for me. It's from Canson. It's called The Wall, if I remember correctly, and they said it was bleed proof, it wouldn't ghost, it was sturdy and thick paper. So I was like, okay, challenge accepted, and it does its job. It does its job pretty well. It's quite white. Sometimes you have a little tone on it, but this one is really white and it doesn't ghost. I was a bit skeptical about it first because, well, I tend to be quite thick with the layers of Copic marker ink. So because I shade first, then go over it again, over it again, over it again, over it again, and over it again if needed. And I was like, I hope you can handle it. But the paper really can handle it. And if you look at the back, it's perfectly fine. So that was a great surprise. And color pencils work on it as well. And sometimes when you have laid ink down first and then go over it with colored pencil, some papers say, nah, I don't like it this much. In this case, the Faber-Castell polychromos did their job wonderfully. You could add some details, and they worked better with when you worked over it with a darker color. So on the orange, darker brown worked perfectly fine. And with the lighter colors like highlights, the little secondary lights on the kimono, the bluish light, I did those with Darwin Soft color pencils because they are really great at showing up lighter colors. So I used my Darwins also pretty much during my life. When I bought a set and they were perfect. They lay down pretty well, and if you are pressing too hard, they can get a bit shiny, but the feeling over it when you press really hard is quite nice. It's really smooth then. And they are just wonderful. I made a ton of pieces with them because the colors are vibrant, and the most beautiful thing about it, if you have a dark color and you want it a bit lighter and you go over it with a white color or even light blue, you can make it lighter. I think it's a bit comparable with the what was it called again? The Prismacolors. Those I meant. Anyhow, here you can see the finished piece, and I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope to see you next week, so have a good one and goodbye.